Buckle up for AEC Trailblazers, the Founders Files, where we crack open the stories of the brightest minds in the AEC startup scene. Forget institutional pitches. We're diving deep into the real personal journeys of these industry disruptors. Get ready for some casual chats firsthand.
Hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of the Trailblazers podcast, where we interview the most amazing founders of the AEC. Here with us, we have Adam Schitter. Adam is a seasoned AEC entrepreneur with more than 20 years of industry experience. As a managing director of Autonomation, he leads the development of innovative software and automation solutions to optimize project workflows and deliver exceptional outcomes. With a focus on data driven decision making, Adam is committed to transforming the AC industry through technology. He's also the one of the founders of Bimbeats and one of the founders of the well known Bad Monkeys. Welcome to the AC Trailblazers, Adam.
Thank you very much for having me, Valentin. It's good to be here. So, been a while since I've done a podcast.
I promise this is going to be fun.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm looking forward to seeing which roads you want to go down and what you want to touch on. So yeah, thanks for having me and thanks for reaching out.
Well, before we were starting, we were speaking about the beautiful Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast of Australia, where you live, right?
Yep. So yeah, it's a place that I like enough that I've never really been able to leave once I moved here, and I did spend a couple of years in the Philippines and then Malaysia as well, working. So yeah, I always come back here and have never had a sort of desire to move to Melbourne and Sydney. Like we were saying, it's just that little bit cozier without the big city sort of rush. But I'm quite an ocean fan. I do sailing and stuff like that. So yeah, got to be close to the ocean.
Nice. Well, I imagine everybody is like that. I remember when I visited Brisbane, you created like a small beach in the middle of the city, right? Like a like artificial beach in the middle of the city.
Yeah. There's like on the other side of the river. There's an area
Correct.
called South Bank. Yeah, and there's a little artificial beach there for the kids and stuff. Because Brisbane is not a coastal city, as you know. It's quite far away from the beach, and then on the beach side of Brisbane is all the giant port of Brisbane and all the shipping stuff. So it's not a great place to go swimming.
And I do now that you are here, and before we deep dive into your life, I'm just curious on what the hell is happening with Aussies, man. Like we analyzed all the AC startup world, right?
Yep.
And like if you divide the amount of people per amount of startups, the highest country in the world with AC startups is Australia. Why is that?
I don't know. Like it's pretty interesting. Like and if I guess I can only talk to my experience around the Revit side, but if you go back to Revit way back in the early days, Brisbane was actually for about 18 months the highest number of license uptake after Autodesk had acquired it. So I think the smaller market here, there's only 5 capital cities, and really there's only 3 of significant size. So you've got a lot smaller contractors, but because you got these vast stretches between them, these guys are still doing, multi billion dollar size. So you've got a very small pool of teams doing very large amount of work. So I think that just opens that ecosystem of when you're trying to get a product out there, you are talking to a smaller pool of teams that control vast amounts of work, as opposed to like in much bigger population centers, you've got hundreds of contractors and they're only ever state based, and the idea of national in every state isn't too common, whereas in Australia every sort of major contractor is pretty much national. So I think it's easier to get technology out, And there is a bit of people are willing to give it a go here. Like our engineering talent as well, I find in AC is quite spread across the world. Especially in the early mid 2000s, a huge portion of us were over in the UK and the Middle East doing that kind of work. So yeah, I think there's just a openness to people having a go and then being quite receptive without probably some of the largeness of the bigger companies. As you get more processes, you get more lockdowns, it gets harder to introduce new things without ticking all those boxes. So yeah, which has been interesting. So
That's a really good answer, and
I've
you're
thought way too long about this stuff.
well, you're one of those guys leading the innovation in Australia and the world. So I bet it's a lot based on your personal experience, right?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Like I was, from purely the Revit side, and I'm not really a Revitor anymore. Most of the time I open up Revit now is because it's running in debug on Visual Studio. um, but in those early days, I was definitely one of the first to get really excited about Revit. And I don't know if it was similar over in the US and other places, but a lot of the sort of guys who led the early stuff were working for very small firms because the bigger firms weren't going to touch it for 5 or 6 years until it had industry validation, all of that sort of thing. So I spent a lot of time training. I worked for a reseller who's today called Arcans, but way back then they were acquired a few times. They were much smaller, called CarolCAD, and so I did a lot of training across architecture initially because that was the first flavor, and then as structure got released, I then trained structure and MEP. So you just got introduced to everyone because this is sort of before YouTube. Augie was and even what was it, Revit Zoo? If you're familiar with Revit Zoo, that was the forums before Augie. That was where people got the information. So I had people, friends of mine that we train, and then they'd be printing out the help file, and that, like, the Revit help file became their Bible. They'd have this very well used printed out copy of the Revit file. So what that opportunity enabled me though was to just work with a lot of companies and a lot of people, training them up, and the whole, hey, let's link all these models together. We've never done that before. That's really interesting, and be involved in that stuff. So it was quite cool, and especially at the time, I guess because it was also innovative, there was just so much passion from all of these early adopters, because then they were trying to push it into their firms, and the resistance of, does it look like my CAD drawing? Why doesn't it look like my CAD drawing? The arrowhead doesn't work nicely. All of those sort of things. So it's a very different challenge as opposed to today. It's much more industry adopted. So you have the problem like, oh, well, if you're not going to go be in Revit or be in BIM, you probably can't work on this project. So, you got these sort of laggards scrambling to adopt versus really trying to push it. So anyway, yeah.
No, I can see that. Like, I, I think I experienced something like like the same you did. Like a couple of years later, I think, because you started like really really early with Revit. I remember I started around 2010 or nine,
Yep.
but but I do think that this, or I bet the same happened to you, because like once you learn Revit, then it was not the new thing anymore, and then you wanted to do Dynamo, and then it was not the new thing anymore, and then you did a lot of Dynamo scripts, and then you wanted to do programming on the Ray API, and maybe that was not the new thing anymore, and who the hell knows what are you working on today? But uh, but I mean, you always pursue. I can see you always pursuing the latest out there, right? Or the next challenge. I don't know if you agree or.
Yeah, like I'm quite curious about technology and its landscapes, and I did end up doing the Dynamo and programming, but I did them in reverse because the API came out before Dynamo came out. So for me, I was like, all right, I have to learn programming because at that point there was no other way to interact with the Revit API. So I started toying around. I had a couple of friends. I was very, very slow coder. So like I think from the first time I started playing with C sharp, and this would have been, I don't know, maybe '08. I reckon it took me about 2 years in a part-time way to really, for it to all click, if that makes sense. Like I'd read my little book and I'd follow the app to build the accounting package, and I get to the end of the chapter, and I'm like, I have no idea what I just did. I'm an idiot. This all sucks. I'm stupid. Throw it away. And then, 3 weeks later, you're like, no, I can do this. And then you repeat that exercise. And so I really think it took me about 2 years to click. And then just around that same time period, you know Jeremy Tamick. And for those who don't, he's a Revit API guru, if not the guru, we might call him that. Been doing it forever prior to that CAD. He came to Australia doing a week of free Revit API training, did hands-on with him. And back then, again, this was like '09, Autodesk couldn't give that away. About 6 of us showed up for the class, and they were calling everyone in Australia like, hey, Jeremy Tamick's here. He's free. So I talked to my boss as soon as I found out. I'm like, I've got to go down to Melbourne. This is really important. And he's like, all right. But yeah, like when we were down there, it was awesome, right? Like a whole week with him, just like, hey, you're working on this, you think about this. And after that, he just had all that expertise just clicked for me, and that's when I got really passionate about it. And then Dynamo, it was a good thing for me because like it allowed me to be a lot lazier with a lot of things. Like Dynamo got that when Dynamo came out, I'm like, oh, cool. I don't have to set up the environment and debug this thing all the time and wait for all my Revit models to open to do these very simple things. I can just whip these prototypes or do things very quickly. So, and then from there I got more interested in different types of technologies, and that then led to application development at AECOM and getting into the GIS space, and then really getting into large databases and just sort of all sorts of weird automation now. And probably similar yourself, like we just we do a lot of R&D with clients. Like a big portion of our work, which is a challenge, is like, hey, we want to build this thing and that thing, and how do you figure out which parts of R&D do you actually figure out, like, oh, this is the product we're going to build, and then be able to scope that and deliver that. So yeah, it keeps you on your toes, I guess.
Oh, I bet. And I love when you said that it took you 2 years, or like, I do remember when I started coding, one of my friends started coding as well with the Revit API, and we were like, we were feeling we were on an A&A meeting because we're both depressed, and it was like, what, did you do something? No. Me neither. Like, I don't understand anything.
It's like I remember specifically the concept of transactions. So like prior to transactions, I'd be like, I can get the things. Why can't I change the things? Why doesn't it just do the thing? And yeah, it's all of those sort of abstract concepts that now are fine, but at the time you just like, I don't understand why it needs this thing in order to do that thing. I just want to do that thing. And oh yeah, like yeah, I found coding real struggle. Like absolute joy now. I code quite a lot now, but it was a big challenge for me.
And now I feel it's also really different because I don't know, you have Copilot, you have AI, you have, and
Yeah.
even the Revit API, it's a website like API Docs, or like I remember when I started, like there was not even a book or easy way to find the book or the documentation for each
Yep.
from each year. It was insane.
Oh yeah. Well, it's just Revit API docs. Like shout out to Gui. Like that is such a handy resource now, and probably similar yourself. Like we've got, Chat GPT. We use the business version, so we've got all our own little chatbots. So we've got the Revit API Sifu, we call him, which is he's got some key documents loaded. He's got some key typical templates and other things that's loaded in there. So we use him a lot for those things. But it's interesting the problems you start dealing with, how good ChatGPT is solving them. Like example, I had again, this is going to be quite nerdy, but I was just having to sort all the levels into a C# list. So just, from ground to level 10 or whatever. And just using typical Lambda to do that costs, and we had to do it on every single element. That costs 120 milliseconds. And I'm like, that's a really expensive Lambda sort. So I just dumped the sort into ChatGPT. I'm like, pretend you're like ultra fast, efficient program and do it. Anyway, it wrote this sorting list a little bit different, but that same algorithm turned into 6 milliseconds. And you're just like, okay, those really focused tasks of like, and especially things where it's like, hey, figure out the best way to sort this thing. they're the stuff that GPT absolutely excels at. And for me to go research that, I'd be 4 hours, 5 hours in going, oh yeah, maybe I should use this pattern or that pattern versus just like check it, does it work, does it look right, and implement, you know?
Yeah, even the debugging. Like
Mm.
I think the other day we were also nerdy, but I love this stuff, man. Like I was exporting a geometry mesh and the normals from Revit, and I was doing a compression algorithm on top of it, and the compression
Yep.
algorithm was failing in certain cases. So I just threw just plain text of all the normals of a huge mesh to ChatGPT, and it's like, hey, this is failing, this is not failing, just pure
Yeah,
data.
nice.
And it understood. It's like, you know what, there are certain normals that are repeated here, and the problem might be the geometry. So I exported the geometry, the vertices and everything, and I throw it, and then it found the family with the wrong geometry, that Revit was producing it wrong.
Yep.
Like it came, so it was insane. I didn't need to go through the code or anything. I just threw it the output, and
Yep.
ChatGPT told me what to do. I don't know. I love it. I love it. It's so much easier. But I do feel that you still need to understand what's happening.
Oh,
Like,
100%. If you can't read the code that it's actually spitting out, then you've got a big disconnect problem. So like that sorting algorithm. Like once I saw what it was doing, oh yeah, it's just dumping stuff in this tree if it's this size, and then it created a simple sort of tree structure for the sort. But yeah, it is very dangerous if you're copying and pasting things randomly. That being said, like definitely among some of the guys who are more, because we've got in Autonomation, we've got a BIM management arm. They do a lot of Power BI for helping pull data out for the contractors and stuff. But they're doing. It is interesting how much they can do. What's it called? The Power M query language for that sits behind Power BI. So much of that now they pull out of Chat GPT, and it's only when they have a real problem that they're like, "Hey, this," but can you help me with X or Y, and go to the devs. But if you, for like a lot of the simple problems, like a lot of ChatGPT is just so good at solving the knowns. And I think that's that challenge where people talk about like, oh, it'll just be able to solve everything, and it's like not really. Like the reason it can create Pac-Man or Pong or whatever is because that problem was solved 50 years ago, and there's 35,000 versions of Pong out there. Solving, the current technology and the next technology challenges. There's no reference to draw on to then make the connection to, you know what I mean? So I think
yeah.
there's still that disconnect there where they think AI is like creating new solutions, and it's really more just like a very, very awesome Google search that can pull what you need and pull it into context.
Oh yeah. Or even sometimes they provide you an answer that used to work. Like, hey, use this library, and the library is not available
Oh
anymore.
yeah,
Or
yeah.
it's like,
Yeah. Well,
there's not going to be a solution there for you.
no, no. All those, when it generates, like, you ask it to do something, and then it's like, I don't know, extract data from room, and then it's like, sure, and then it's like, object dot extract data from room, and you're like, yeah, that's not a method.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You go to the Revit API. Yeah, yeah, that happened to me as well. It's like, oh, this is amazing. And then you go to Revit API docs, and it's like,
No,
this
no,
is not a
that
method.
that magic method does not exist.
Yeah. No,
uh,
absolutely. That happens. That happens a lot. Yeah, no,
yeah.
no. No, and I think
uh,
it's gonna take time until it can generate new solutions. I feel the complexity between where AI is now and the complexity that it needs to happen for AI to actually understand and produce a new solution is going to take a while. It's not going to happen in a couple of months.
no, definitely not. Like it's one of those things where and I don't know if you've done much in the agentic workflows. That it's so multi-agent, so you give each agent a persona, and they all sort of,
Yeah, yeah.
one's an analysis, one's a double checker, and they all rumble together to try and come up with a solution. And some of those are quite clever, but they're extremely chatty. And then again, it's all the limitations, right? Like I don't know if you play with like the llama models and stuff like that, and
Mm.
Llama, which is a desktop version,
Yeah.
which is really cool. Like their token limits are so small, and if you don't tell them to stop, and I think again it's these little things that like people aren't aware of, like ChatGPT will just keep chatting forever. They've built mechanisms to telling it when to finish or run out of tokens. Otherwise, these things will burn through tokens, forget what they were talking about at the beginning, and then just start talking, total nonsense. Like, it was interesting when we were first testing like the llama models, the smallest ones, as whenever we were talking stuff about BIM, as soon as it ran out, it would start yappering on about Disney, and there must have been some correlation in the model because it just kept bringing up. It had hit sort of the end of the token limit, and then it'd just start ranting about Disney and this news article from a few years ago. And we're like, where is this coming from? But specifically, if BIM was involved, there's some weird correlation in there to Disney.
Disney.
So yeah,
Disney, Mickey, I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you.
yeah,
Human, die, die, die.
yeah. So again, it's these, yeah, like, and I guess people personify these things too, and give them, like, I get, in a sense, they can be personified, but people like to do that with all sorts of objects. You know what I mean? Like, you leave a guy on an island long enough, and he'll turn his soccer ball into his best friend.
True, true. Well, it's like every time. What kind of person are you when you speak to ChatGPT? Are those who just give orders, or you ask nicely?
I am a polite person. I
Yeah, I
do
am too.
like to, I do like to say, thanks and please and those sort of things. And again, it's that waste. I guess it's that wasted sort of context, but I guess it's you're taking in the corpus of how generally people speak to
Mm.
each other. So I guess that's the way I look at it. But it is still. It's interesting when you get into prompts when you want like JSON and other things, how much you modify your prompt and then how big the prompts become. Do you know what I mean? Like the prompts can
Yeah.
get hundreds and hundreds of lines to get very specific things out and all the do's and don'ts. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like you said. It varies so much depending on what you're trying to ask or what you're trying to accomplish, and if something really specific or is something that it had been done thousands of times. Like
Yeah.
we we even tried to create, well, we, I think we all have tried to create like actual endpoints, right? That you get a JSON file that then you can deserialize it and present it to a UI. And I don't think we're at a point where we can use something like that in production. Like, I mean, for
Yeah.
R&D, it's great, but like it always, even if you say explicitly only provide me this answer, sometimes it puts stuff that it's nonsense on the JSON file inside the
Yeah.
JSON file. So um, I don't know. It's hard to use it for exact things or things that are critical.
Oh
Or
yeah, it's. I think machine learning is great, and I guess like where I've had success outside of GPT, like a few years ago, we built a tagging tool for a big engineering company, and we used machine learning for that, and that worked really really well. So basically, it'd predict, we get an image where the tag should go. So it'd be a picture of a column, some text there or whatever, and then the machine learning would figure out, okay, the tag needs to go here and predict it. And that worked really, really well because tags are an imprecise. Like, if your tag ends up a millimeter to the left or right or up or down, as long as it's not sitting on text or grids or whatever, it's a fantastic use case. But, like, if you're trying to place a column, that's a very exact thing to do. And 100%, like you said, these things, need to, you know, place exactly. So you probably using the language of GPT is going to give you these random results. And I don't know if you've looked into some of like, and I know we're going way down this AI place, which is always cliche now because what everyone talks about. But I don't know if you've looked at like the RAG workflow where you kind of have like a database of information, and ChatGPT kind of grabs some information from that database and then uses that to form a response. But if you think that logic through, like let's pretend you had a chatbot on your website to help you navigate through your help files. When you see people starting to use it, they store the best responses in the database, so it no longer has to look up ChatGPT to generate the tokens. So you almost use ChatGPT as your starting point, but eventually you end up with this database that has 99% of your return queries, and you're only using then ChatGPT to the fallout. So it is this interesting mix of, instead of sitting there going, oh, what would all the things the users ask me, you kind of use ChatGPT to help establish that. But at some point, if you're doing it right, you start bringing that down, because you don't want the risk. If you've got the perfect answer, why run the risk of giving it to ChatGPT? It uses a different model, the prompt changes, and it gives you a different result. Those sort of things.
No,
So, mm,
absolutely, that makes sense. Well, I think we were speaking this with the Beam Logic guys, or of
yeah,
adding layers, adding layers on top of ChatGPT. I think at this point, that's the only way to actually fine tune a solution that works most of the time. But and I think another interesting point is that sometimes for you to create a good model, or whether it is a LLM, right, or LLM assistant, because it's so hard to create your own LLM, uh,
yeah,
like you need to be a big company or something, but you can create machine learning models, and for that, the also bad point is the data. Like, for example, we gather data of 100 projects, and we
yeah,
try to create, because we didn't make it completely successful, to create a model that predict Gantt charts based on the type of project you have. Like, you have all
yeah,
your beam models, your beam elements, create a beam Gantt chart, and tell you, you know what, this might be delayed, or this might not be delayed, and 100 projects is nothing. So
yeah.
like, I'm just curious, now, your clients have access to all the data, for example, that they have using Bimbeats. Like,
Yeah.
are they doing something with all that data, or?
Um, like, to your point, the hard thing with machine learning, like you said, and there's probably two parts. If we're talking on the Bimbeats with machine learning, we do have a couple of clients who have connected it to their own Copilot bots. We're also looking at that as well, but more in the context of, so for those who don't know, Bimbeats is basically a bit of technology that generally larger businesses install, and it captures like everything from like what software is being used, the telemetry around Revit crashes when it crashes, some deep dives into Revit, but then also into Rhino, Grasshopper, AutoCAD, Navisworks. So sort of your full BIM and CAD suite, and then all your engineering apps and everything. Um, with the stuff that we've done, so when we first started doing tests with the machine learning, we have a ton of dashboards, right? So we're drowning our users in dashboards. So I think we have something like 360 at the moment, and they're all connected, right? Like, you drill down, you can start at the top, and you have the enterprise wide, and then you click into a project that lists all the files for that project. So they're all connected. There is a user experience for it, but there's still like, I just want to go find X, right? Like, where is X? So kind of the first thing we built was a little chat GPT that would, go find my dashboard, basically. And we never implemented it. It was just a bit of a proof of concept. And part of the challenge was implementing, like, how do we implement chat GPT into other businesses when we don't control those endpoints? But now, with like what you're talking about now, there's sort of two approaches to it. So one is the text embedding, or the vector database approach, where you encode all the data, which we're not currently doing, into something that an LLM can read. So you kind of ask it questions. The problem with that, though, with Bimbeats is an aggregator, right? So it's not about one data point that matters. So in a big business, we'll capture 400 to 500 million data points a day. Like, it's pretty scalable on that front. So when you're looking at data at that level, you really have to think about swim lanes and min and max, and getting rid of the top stuff and getting rid of the bottom. Like a simple example, let's say you look at Revit open times for the week, right? So average Revit open time might be 2 minutes, but you might have someone that's 4 hours. Um, the reality is, why is that person 4 hours? Is because they started opening Revit and they went and did something else, or they went and got a coffee, or they drove somewhere. But so again, the first thing is like, people are, oh, there's a problem. The project's really big, but that one data point is an anomaly. It's when you start grabbing everyone's data points and maybe your project's taking 50 minutes to open or something like that, and you got to draw those conclusions. So where that leads you with the machine learning is what we need something to become very good at is understanding how the data is structured, what's the data is, and the schema of the data. So when you basically ask it a question, it can go and form the SQL query, let's just call it like that, in order to return the information that you want. So in that place, the machine learning is actually its whole job is to like take a natural language query, turn it into a SQL query, and you're interacting with it that way, rather than having to go, oops, search the information all the time. So very different problem compared to, I've got this data, I just want to turn it into a big database and go find me my Revit standard or something. So yeah, so that's where we're looking at the moment. And yeah, the challenges is just how valuable is that? People want the data coming back to them, and I know you guys do a lot of analytics too. So it's like death by Power BI is a pretty common thing now. You have so many dashboards, people
Yeah.
don't know where to look, what's important. How do you bring that back via Teams messages and start going, here's a problem, you need to go here and do X and that sort of stuff. And the insights, I don't know if you've seen this, but we've definitely seen with the insights that the insights without the action is kind of like solving 50% of the pie. Do you know what I mean? Like if you just,
Yeah.
it's like a clash report. It's like, hey, here's all the things that are wrong. Okay, how's this positive? There's no
Yeah.
there's no proactiveness. It's just like,
Correct.
hey, here's a bunch of stuff. You guys suck. Everything's bad, but we're not going to give you the solution. So it's how do you get that other half and then go one step further, not just like, oh, and your solution. I know we found a bunch of imported CAD templates in this project, because you imported something naughty. There's a problem. The solution is to delete them. Then the next thing is, would you like us to delete them for you? That sort of like insight, but leaving the choice in the hands of the user. Maybe there's a reason they're all in there and all of that sort of stuff, and you got to allow for that.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Like, and I can relate to that. Like, I remember we were doing a data warehouse centralization for a client, and we made a mistake of asking each area of the company which dashboards they wanted, right?
Yep.
And we created a list, and it was like that. Like, I think it was like 150 dashboards, something like that.
Yep.
So we created all of them. We were like, we're gonna kill it. And
Yeah.
then, like a couple of months later, when we checked how many of the dashboards people were
Are being
using, and
used.
it was like less than 10%.
Yep.
So we learned it the hard way, and it's easy. Like, technology is easy. Like,
Yeah.
the hard thing is the implementation or how you use it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that challenging problem with this data, right? Of like, you talk to the higher up you go, they just say, "Oh, I want a traffic light system or a smiley face." So red, green, red, orange, green, or happy to sad or angry or something, you know. But the problem is when you build that, then they're like, "Okay, well then why is it orange? Who decided it was orange?" Or like you see systems with like a score between 1 and 100, and they're like, "Okay, why is it 62%?" And so automatically now you've got this distrust of the number because how did you guys come up with the number? What biases did you put? And that's always something for us with Bimbeats. We've made some opinions about certain things, right? Like if you've got over a couple of hundred placeholder in place families in your model, probably something's gone wrong. If you've got a bunch of groups that have only been placed, once, there's something wrong. If you have colossally large model files and like 25 people in a week working in your project, chances are things are going to be not very good. But you can't get too opinionated because then people lose trust because they're not understanding how you got to the smiley face or the sad face. And then again, it's that problem of like, I think I want a smiley face, but if it's sad, what do I do? I don't know what to do with the sad face. So
Yeah.
again, it's that, how do you link that to the action, right?
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. It's like you said, it's half of the problem. The other half is what you do with it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel with products sometimes it's easier than with services,
Yep.
because with products is I'm gonna buy a water bottle, and I know it's a water bottle, and I know the features of the water bottle. And if I don't like the water bottle, it's on me. But I knew what it was.
Yep.
With a service, it's much harder to actually define where you, and even it's even harder if you're doing R&D, like you mentioned. I don't know if your
Yep.
experience is the same.
Oh, 100%. Like, look, services are harder because, especially if it's like pure R&D stuff. So like that machine learning tagging thing I was talking about, like that company had built a tagging tool, and the problem was it was just it was using straight out of Revit a bit of a justification to the side to place the tag. So again, not taking into account context. So their problem's like, okay, we built this tool, places the tags, but people still got to move the tags. Place if you've got to move it anyway, you might as well just place it. We're not really making things that much more efficient. So but that was pure R&D. Like we just had to go look. They were like, come up with an approach, and we went and did some learning, and we found out something called diff inferencing, which is just a type of machine learning approach, and we're like, we think this can solve it, but we don't know. And they're like, okay. And then I'm like, but before we even do this, and you sort of brought up this point before, we need to build a bunch of tools just to harvest all the information we need to train the model in the first place, right? And so again, it's this problem of like, oh, okay, is that going to take a while? And you're like, oh yeah, training the models. Yeah, I have like 300 Python code example. There's like 700 million of them out there now. Like training models are easy. The gathering the data, especially in BIM when we don't have any, like there's PDF chunking to it. There's all this stuff in the PDF. So in AC, there's like none of that stuff. So you got to go build it all yourselves. So like most of your budget is like building these tools, extracting data, generating synthetic data. Like we would do things like we'd like take a picture of a good tag, like a tag that's been placed well, and then we would like randomly move it all over the place and take a bunch of pictures to be like, that's a bad way to place the tag. So we'd have we'd automate that process. But like all of these weird things that you never think of, and moving tags in a view, you've got to control the camera in Revit. So you're literally watching Revit like zoom in, do 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 do, extract the image because you need the image, and the only way to get an image is from the camera unless you take the whole anyway. So yeah, suddenly there's this data capture, and then there's huge data manage. Someone's got to look through all those tags and decide what's good or what's bad. So yeah, R&D becomes this bigger problem of, and again, you have to premise this with like, this is an approach. We don't know if it's a right approach, and it's having the client having the confidence, like, and the know-how, like, yeah, this could fall over.
No,
Right.
and it's hard to say it because
Right.
clients expect yes or no. Like, can you do
Yep.
it? Yes or no? And it's not that you don't know your stuff. You really know your stuff, but it's something that nobody has ever done. So how
Yep.
can you like estimate something that no one has ever done, and that it can fail? And
Yep.
it's hard. It's really hard. And even I don't know if that happens to you, but even if I'm sometimes like 90% sure that it's gonna work, I cannot
Yep.
say it's gonna work because
Oh yeah.
then
Yep.
if that 10% or 5% or 2% doesn't work, client is gonna kill me.
Yeah, and like I can bring up a job that we did have as a failure. We were working with a structural engineering business, and they wanted to predict the reinforcement square meterage in the slab, or sorry, cubic meterage in the slabs over given areas to side a, so basically you'd be able to give it a slab profile with thicknesses and columns, and it kind of dust over this reinforcement area. And this is one of our first machine learning projects. And again, like the same problem you're talking about, gathering the data, right? Like they're like, oh yeah, don't worry, we've got hundreds and hundreds of projects. We've done so many projects. And then when we went and mined them, because they're not a huge company, we're like, actually, you don't really have that many projects. And you don't have them in the way that you've been working in Revit the last 2 years. Like the last 7 years, you guys changed your standards and systems 2, 3 years ago. So that's all rubbish. We can't really use that. Um, and then we build all the training tools and stuff like that. We started extracting all the data, started doing the training. And it just got to the point where we're like, we need like 5 times the amount of data you guys have. Um, and and so the client's like, oh, okay, well, we're not going to grow 5 times the size in the next year, and deliver 5x the amount of projects of that topology. Um, and so all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, yeah, sorry guys, this didn't work. And again, like that's a you have that conversation with the client, but as long as you set those expectations up front, I think it's okay. Like you're right. Like no one likes to waste money, and like we learnt a lot of things, so I wouldn't consider it a waste from our end. I definitely, but ultimately they committed resources, and the outcome was like, sorry guys, this can't be done under the current constraints. And especially it's interesting with buildings because people think there's so much data in buildings, and these guys were high rise specialists, right? High rises are actually, in a sense, the worst because they're all typical. So you think, oh yeah, 50-story building, you have 50 floors. It's like, no, you've got like 6 floors. The basements, retail, and maybe the first, and then a low rise, a medium, and then a penthouse. There's not that much data that's not repetitive in some of these buildings. So again, it's not until you really sit down and think about see those things, you're like, okay, well, we're not introducing anything new. We're kind of might as well just do a copy and paste and send the same thing in 30 times. So anyway, but yeah, I don't know how to do it other than making sure we set expectations, and that client still uses us, so it wasn't a bad experience. They were just trying to get something done, and we just had to highlight like we don't know. And
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
so
it's about being transparent, and you never know until you start analyzing it, right? Like
yeah,
sometimes clients just send you some information and they're like, can you estimate this? And it's like, well, I can, but if I don't get the real data and I get to see the actual make a diagnostic of the
yeah,
problem, is the number, it can vary so much. Like
yeah, yeah.
like
And you'll always get that challenge of like if you get that client who's like, I really need something quickly, just throw a number at it. You're like, okay, I will, but I'll throw a really risky number at it because I got to
yeah,
buffer in all these unknowns. So like, if you give me more data, it will get more affordable. But right now, I just
correct.
have to guess, and I picture every worst case scenario in the world happening.
Like Revit adding $1 million. Sure,
Yeah, yeah,
just yeah, sure.
yeah,
And you give me
yeah.
more data, I will review the number.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So it is interesting, and then it's interesting when you have clients with like we've dealt with a couple of startups, and I don't know if you experienced this where they you realize they don't have a technology solution. They've got like a PowerPoint slide, and they've actually gotten funding. And they start going through, and they're like, "We just want you to build this," and you're like, I still don't understand what it is you're asking me to build. Like, oh, we just want to, this thing that, robot goes outside and 3D builds the whole house. And we need that in Unreal, but on the web. We want Unreal on the web, press the button, 3D printing in the house. And you're like, okay, I get the high level vision, but like, these are all very hard things to, like, you can't build this, and like how do you deal with your supply chain, and how do you start breaking it down, and you're like, how are all these, how's the kitchen configurator meant to, oh, you just throw in a bit of AI, bit of data, and it'll just guess the kitchen. Yeah, no. I'm like, I can't price that because that's not a thing.
We have my CTO Pablo. He has a phrase which is, "This is 100 products all together." When there is like, it's like, this is not a POC to take to the
Yep.
market. This is like 100 products together. Like that, there is no way you can do it as a start of a startup. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I guess we all have been through that, and it's just, but it's good, I think, because you get the chance not also to add value in terms of like just technology, but also in
Yep.
terms of like, you cannot go to market with this kind of product, or
Yep.
or some of them might have great ideas, but the product might be huge, and it's like,
Yep.
it's a clear idea, but this is too big, it's going to take us
Yep.
2 years. Can you afford this 2 years? And even if you can, I don't think it's a good idea. Just do something small, and if the market likes it, we can scale it up. And I don't
Yep.
know, at least for us is is what we have
No,
seen.
no, we're exactly the same, and it is that problem. And I don't know, like we've done it a couple of times where we committed to something that was a bit big, and you realize like there's just so many assumptions. As the bigger the project is, like you know, ultimately the longer it takes, there's just more features, and all of those features are assumptions. And I'd be keen to hear on your experience because we always now really push like we know you want these 20 things even if they're all really crystal clear. Let's build these two and
Mm.
figure out the most two important, get them in the hands of users. The user becomes more experienced, and then they're going to drive. Like maybe we don't need four. Maybe it was a really cool idea, but it has no use for the users. And I don't know if you have that same tension where we typically try and push the client back down so that they get some value in the first place. So they're so much more comfortable reinvesting than in their own product versus something really big, and then they realize like they've spent all this money and they're not getting the adoption that they wanted. Yeah, I don't know if you have the same
No, yeah,
approach or.
yeah, no, we do the same thing, and I always say it's like it's not that I don't want to get extra money, that I don't want to charge you a lot of
Yeah,
money. Is that I don't want you to be pissed at me when it's not gonna be my fault when you realize in 10 months that you don't have money or that the clients don't want what you thought they wanted. Um, and yeah, we learned it the hard way. Like
yep,
there's always great clients and we never speak about them because it's just easy, clients who have
yep,
experience in the industry, have experience software development, and they come with real clear roadmap, and everything flows and it's perfect. But with some others, it's like that you have to push them and help them go to the market with something really really small. I would say like if it's taking more than a month, you're and you're a startup that is just starting, it's not a good thing. Like it
yep,
should not be more than a month until you go to market, even if it's something ugly. And no, I agree 100% on that. Like, it's the only way, and we have also learned the hard way that for some clients, it's like, you know what, we're not a match. I'd rather
yep,
prefer you go and work with another firm that might want to take the risk.
yep.
Sure. But we're not going to do it because we'd rather prefer be transparent and honest with this.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well, like because we do a lot of work with enterprises, so you know, building technology for
Mm.
use in enterprises, and it's interesting the trade-offs you make in enterprises versus like consumer stuff, because like in enterprises, and I'm ashamed to say, well, I'm not ashamed, it's just reality. Our interfaces do not get the love and attention that the consumer products get. Um, and like you know, you look at these things. I don't know about you, but I kind of cringe and I don't know about that. But you know, you talk to the dev team and they're like, they don't want it, and people are paid. And the reality is, people are being paid to push the buttons. They're not paying to push the buttons, so you can make these trade-offs as long as like it is stable. Like you have to have performance stability. Like these things can't break internally because everyone complains up, and then it looks bad for the guy you're working with. So like it can be. I found like enterprise can be ugly as sin. You know, we've got some really cool cloud apps that are
Yeah.
powered by like SharePoint UIs because the client's like, we know how to use SharePoint. All our other things are in SharePoint. Can we just build the SharePoint thing the way we want, and you just build the back? And like, yeah, yeah, that's fine, whatever. Whereas like consumer, obviously, it does need to be easy. You do need to know where all the buttons are. I know it's the same thing, but yeah, it is that interesting trade off how function takes over form in enterprise by like a massive margin, but the client's saving money and still getting the outcome. You know?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree 100% on that. Um, all right, I don't want to take more of your time because we can be discussing this for hours, man.
Yeah, yeah. We didn't even touch on. I guess I thought we were going to go down, you know, the business side of things. But yeah, man. Like, yeah. I'm all good. But yeah, it's interesting that we went down this rabbit hole instead,
Yeah, yeah. But
which is cool.
it was
Yeah.
cool.
Sorry.
Like I don't know, I really no. Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupt you.
Oh no, no. I think it just speaks like you know, and you probably met business founders from other industries and similar size. Like it is a bit rare, I guess, that you have the really sort of nerdy geek guys running these. companies in a sense, and it's a different type of environment as to, so I guess people who are focused on the profitability, and like we've got, you have people in the business that run that, but it is that interesting spearhead where you can sort of dive deep nerdy but still look
It's
after
much more
businesses.
fun. Yeah,
I
exactly.
think
Because
so. I
when
think
when
so.
founders come more from I don't know, business or marketing side, or you only can go on that avenue. When it's a technical founder, you can go like we did, speak about clients, speak about technical, the API, like mix a little bit of everything, and I don't know, it's more fun, I guess.
I, I think you get like the big advantage is like you do get the chance to play with things and commit some capital to learn about things. Whereas if you're in a business, it's much harder to go. Oh, okay, I can get the money to throw a bunch of cloud credits to Chat GPT and play with fine tuning and see what that looks like. Like it's so you, whereas I guess when you're more business run, like I guess things tighten up a little bit more, but like our team has plenty of innovation time just because it's important
Yeah,
to me that our team gets to experiment and play, because in my experience those have led to better outcomes for the client rather than like, no, we've got to just
yeah,
be billable, just be this. And you see that more in sort of the engineering consultancy sort of space where there's a high focus on billable, definitely compared to how much sort of we give innovation to the team. But in my experience, that's just led to much better outcomes for the client. People feel they get the time
yeah.
to do those things. Yeah. And I guess there are others out there you can always hire bit, like we have business advisors, we have guys that manage the accounts. Like you don't need those skills. They're probably the least important skills to run a business in some way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, in
No,
our space
absolutely.
anyway.
No, I agree. I agree. And even more if it's a bootstrap business like
Yeah.
the ones you ran and the one I ran, it's the same, man. Like you don't have the pressure to be successful in or be a millionaire in 1 year or 2 years. Like
Yeah.
you just want to enjoy what you do, add value, and yeah, if you become a millionaire, absolutely, that's great. But
Yeah.
it's not when you're not a bootstrap, they push you to either be successful or fail, but nothing in between. And you don't have time, right? You have time, and that's the difference with what we do is like I don't know. I think we take more time to actually provide quality. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. No, I definitely think so. And I think the cool thing, especially as you get bigger, like you get to surround yourself with the same sort of people, right? So when you're working in a practice, there's like one of you or maybe two of you, and you're considered like the computational wizards, or there's the weird Revit coding guy who also works on projects. Um, whereas like once you get busy, you get to surround yourself with all of those cool guys that you've like, and people and girls you've met in the industry. You're like, hey man, do you want to come and do this full time and not have to be worried about billable? And then all of a sudden you get to surround yourself every day with like people who are passionate, but this sort of this sort of space of innovation and working on weird coding things. And yeah, like that, I still haven't seen too many organizations. There's a couple of the really big
Yeah, there.
organizations, but in the mid tier market, it's very hard if you've got one computational designer, and there's no way you can say sustain a team. So I think that's really cool as well.
No, 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 absolutely. There is a big market there. And like last year when I spoke at AU, we did a development with a big firm. And
Yep.
one of the feedback from, from the attendees was like, yeah, a really cool tool, only for a really fancy and rich firm. And it was like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
I know, but like, what do you want me to do about it?
Yeah, yeah, and that's the reality. Like software development, I think compared to 15 years ago, and I know we're going over time, but sorry, I can keep chatting forever. You cut me off, Valentin, when you're ready. But like software development, like 15 years ago, probably 20 now. Let's show my age. It was just 10 times harder. Like now, this like your devs can be coding. They can publish directly to the client's cloud. It's completely secure.
Sure.
The latest version just fires up in Azure or AWS and starts running. Like the whole friction of building and releasing and even coding these solution is so much smaller than it used to be. Um, so it's still expensive, but it's definitely more affordable than it was 20 years ago, to build even some of these technologies, because then you'd be like, okay, we need a deployment team. They got to take the software, fly to the company, stick it in a box somewhere. All of this stuff is gone. Like when I did the very first ever deployment of Bimbeats. So we convinced a large architecture firm called BVN in Australia. They were my first client who I hadn't even finished the product yet. I'm like, I promise I'll finish the product. It will be finished. All right. Um, and to deploy it, because I spent 2 weeks in their office because we hadn't built all the installers.
Yeah.
I was like manually copying all these schemas and systems and stuff now that takes 90 minutes for even the biggest company took like 2 weeks. And it's crazy how software allows that sort of that just all the other pieces that used to be so hard are just gone.
No, it's just insane, and it's given even or like it's even cheaper because you're even more fast. You're faster producing
Yeah.
this with like AI and no, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I do have to run now. But
No, you go.
but before wait. But before we can we record? I ask you where they can know more about you and all that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean, let me do before. Let me. Sorry.
Okay, you go.
Yeah. Before we say goodbye to each other, can you
Yeah.
tell everybody where they can know more about Autonomation and Bimbeats?
Yep. Best place to find me is on LinkedIn, like everyone else, Adam Sheether. I'm on there pretty regularly. I think, like most people, I am on X, but I rarely use it. Automation, it's pretty. There's a website, automation.co, and then bimbeats.com if you're interested in any of those sort of spaces. But definitely feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. I usually answer, but Valentin will test that it's not 100% of the time.
Not sure about it, but it was a long time ago, so I'm just gonna say nowadays, yes, he always answers. All right,
Cool.
man. Thanks very much for all this. You're becoming, or you're a legend like Jeremy Tamick in the industry. So thanks so much for sharing all what you do, man. It's what you and Conrad do. It's amazing.
No, thank you so much, man. Like I love going down this side of stuff. So thanks for having me on. It's been awesome chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will let you know as soon as we publish. All right.
Yeah, no worries, Valentin. All right, man. You take care, and I'll talk to you soon. At AU, I hope.
You too. Yeah, we see.
Yeah.
Let's see each other at AU, grab a beer or something. All right.
Sounds perfect. Awesome.
Okay, man. Have a great
All
day.
right. See you, man.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
See you.
Thanks to our listeners. If you like this content, you can find past and upcoming episodes in ascworks.everse.com and at all of our Everse social media. We'd love to hear from you and recommendations for new content, so leave us a DM and we'll make sure to catch it.